Hello everyone and welcome to yet another day in this, the Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And if you would like to be updated with all things Clown Decade, do subscribe to the channel and of course become a member. The subject of today's video is pretty much going over one of the most serious people on the right that I think I can find. This man is literally the person I go to have any sort of better understanding when it comes to reform, when it comes to Nigel Farage, and when it comes to the modern political revolution that we are seeing. And that is Gawain Towler's Navigating the Minefield of Power. And this was a speech given to the Centre for Policy Studies Thatcher Fellowship at Jesus College, Cambridge, a few days ago on the 12th of July. And I think it's worth going through because, quite clearly to me, Gawain is the type of person that knows what he's talking about and quite clearly has a plan. Another reason for going through this is that Gawain is looking to get voted onto the board for reform, which is going to be one of the first major votes within reform on who should be in the top brass, and I very much am going to be voting Gawain Towler. He is very much the man to follow. But of course quite a lot of the, let's say, more radical areas of the right are not big fans of him, well, because mainly of this.
As Nigel says, one of his proudest boasts, he drove the far right from British politics. And he did. And we did.
Yes, and I'm of the opinion that this was a rather good thing. I did not like Nick Griffin and the BNP, and obviously then when UKIP came along, that was a lightning rod for people who did not like fascism but also wanted to be firmly to the right of where the Tories and Labour were, and we're in the exact same situation again, and this is why people don't like Towler. To be fair, it does go a bit beyond this.
Now, of course, you have organisations like Hope. They've just produced a report, and there's a picture of me saying, "Why a reform far right?" And I'm there, I'm it. Which rather amused me, rather-ish.
Quite funny that that part of the clip is in front. I thought this came after what he's about to say. But it's quite clear to me there that Gawain Towler is not a fan of Hope Not Hate, but everyone still calls him a Hope Not Hate asset, well, because of this.
In fact, many years ago, we worked with Hope Not Hate to winkle out the fascists from our own ranks. At that time when we were ripping them out of our system, there were times where one of the guys in the press office was in touch with them just to double check. We think this guy's dodgy, is he on your list?
Now, a lot of people obviously were not happy with this because any association with Hope Not Hate whatsoever puts you on the Dork Right's naughty list. Of course, for some reason when it comes to Matt Goodwin, the association, despite the fact he was much closer to Hope Not Hate, seems to drift away for most people. Not for all, obviously, but, well, they all purity test each other to different levels. But, well, given his tweet about this since then, effectively saying that one of the colleagues, as he said in the press office in 2012, was in contact with Hope Not Hate, effectively to double-check that people he suspected as being dodgy actually were on the dodgy Hope Not Hate list. He clearly, since at least later 2012, maybe 2013, even 2014, it doesn't matter, this is over 10 years ago, he clearly would not have anything to do with them, as he says in the tweet. And hell, he calls them a grift machine in the actual clip.
Hope Not Hate as it is today is like some of the climate scientists. If they don't keep on saying it, they won't get the money. They are now purely a grift machine.
And even other people who worked in UKIP at the time were openly saying that if you think reform had anything to do with Hope Not Hate for the past decade, possibly even slightly longer than that, then you're completely wrong. Raheem Kassam, who was a close ally and advisor of Nigel back in the 2015 UKIP days, said, "When I worked for Nigel, we faced almost daily protests from Hope Not Hate and their allies. Even lower-level staff at UKIP had to have some level of protection during the 2015 campaign. I know you two don't get along," he's talking to Tommy Robinson here, having a go at Nigel, "but this is just wrong." Where he's also, I may as well just put the whole thing in. Because the Restorationists have just done a bit of an expose on Hope Not Hate, and there's been some resignations from Hope Not Hate. I don't know why they think that the resignations are anything to do with them. Hope Not Hate have an absolutely astounding level of credibility with the government and with the media, because back in 2019 they saved an MP's life. I'm not even joking about that, by the way. So if you think some, I hate to put it this way, but seriously, some no-name, brand-new, right-wing outlet has had any effect on Hope Not Hate whatsoever, then whatever. But now they've made a claim that they've got evidence that Nigel Farage is working with Hope Not Hate. Did they publish the evidence? No. So as far as I'm concerned, this is to be taken with quite a big shovel of salt. But obviously Tommy Robinson was on top of this, effectively trying to counter-signal them because he's largely on the Lowe and Habib train now. Despite the fact that I don't think, maybe Ben Habib will, but Rupert Lowe isn't going to be speaking at Tommy Robinson events. Anyway, that's a whole different kettle of fish and not the point of this video. The point I'm trying to make is that if you think Reform or UKIP had some massive dealings with Hope Not Hate and some Hope Not Hate assets, you are sorely mistaken. Someone like Matt Goodwin was actually working with Hope Not Hate, and he has never once claimed this, even before he took his pivot to the right. So let's just put our thinking caps on here. Anyway, I think it's about time we got back to the article. So if you've been following British politics lately, you'll know that Reform UK isn't just a blip on the radar anymore, not a soufflé set to collapse, it's an entire seismic shift. As someone who's been in the trenches with this movement for over 2 decades, from UKIP's early days to the Brexit Party's battering ram tactics and now Reform's surge, I've seen it all. The polls have us at 30%, membership closing in on 230,000, and projections whispering of a landslide, but let's cut the triumphalism, which is definitely something that I need to start doing. Today I want to talk about the real story, the threats lurking if Reform actually forms a government. Success isn't guaranteed, failure could unravel not just us, but the fabric of British democracy. I titled this post in the spirit of a deep reflection, probing not just the surface wins, but the profound risks ahead. It's not alarmism, it's a call to arms for thoughtful engagement. If we're serious about change, we must anticipate the pitfalls. And I think you can see why I want to go through this. Because while I have been celebrating Reform's triumph in the polls and elections for, well, 2 months now, it is quite clear that they are the most likely to form a government. We still don't know if it's going to be a minority or majority. And obviously with that comes the question of, well, how do they actually run the damn country? And what I'm seeing an awful lot of is effectively not great analysis from the mainstream, even worse analysis from the anti-Farage left and right on Twitter. And Gawain Towler is the man I always come back to for where a Reform thinking roundabout now, because while he's not in the centre of the Reform top brass, he very well may be soon though, he is probably the person who knows Farage better than anyone else, who is going around the houses along with, say, Alex Phillips, having to reiterate to everyone exactly what the Farage tactics will be, because really they haven't changed over time, and really why would they? Because they've won him elections before, they won him the Brexit votes, they won him plenty of European elections, and now it's probably going to win him a general election. Hell, it won him locals. Next up, hopefully it's going to be the devolution elections, then even more locals, and then in the end, hopefully it will be Parliament. So he starts off with a quick recap. To grasp the threats, context matters. Our tribe started with UKIP in '93, laser focused on ditching the EU. We topped the 2014 European polls at 26.6%, but Westminster's first past the post system kept us out. Which is the system working, by the way. Post-referendum, UKIP splintered, giving way to the Brexit Party in 2019, which is obviously the only one that mattered. As its first employee and comms director, I watched us hit 30.5% in the Euros, then self-sacrificed by standing down to ensure Boris Johnson's win. We're the only party that hasn't just repeated the mantra, country before party, we're the ones who have actually carried it out despite the pain. Which is a point I keep making. The only reason Nigel Farage keeps coming back is because he feels he still has a place in politics to actually change the way the system works. We thought we were getting that change with Boris Johnson, turns out we didn't. So Farage has had to come out of retirement again, pay thousands upon thousands for his security every month, have non-stop attacks from the media as well as the alt media these days as well, all effectively to do the thankless job of, well, actually having the political revolution the country has been crying out for, well, years. He has been front and centre of it every time, and as I keep saying, he is effectively a 30-year project. I know people don't like the idea of this, but effectively, yeah, you do just have to stick with him until he does completely fail or until basically he retires for good or dies. They're your only options here. Going with anyone else, as we are seeing, isn't really working, and I don't think will work. We branded as Reform under Richard Tice in 2020. We simmered at 8 to 10% until Nigel Farage's 2024 return ignited the rocket. We grabbed 4.1 million votes, 14.3%, and 5 seats in Brexit heartlands. The 2025 locals were a breakthrough, 677 seats, control of 10 councils, and a by-election adding MP. Now we're eyeing 2026's devolved elections, leading the polls in Wales, projecting 17 seats in Scotland, and poised to challenge Labour's grip. And as someone who's in Wales actually leafleting for reform, people are rather excited, unless they're left-wing. This ascent is exhilarating, but it's exposing cracks. We're light on big names beyond Farage and Lee Anderson, the policy depth needs work. We're addressing that by engaging with think tanks like Prosperity Institute, the CPS, which I believe is the Centre for Policy Studies, and businesses, even discreetly for those wary of backlash. Our pillars, family, community, country, resonate with the somewheres by governing demands more than instinct. And I agree with all that, though, to be honest, the big names thing is actually a little bit of a blessing in disguise, because while it comes with the massive disadvantage of effectively the whole thing looking like Farage's project yet again, what it actually means is that when, we've lost 2 MPs, that's not a good thing. However, losing 2 MPs and still having the party stick at about 30%, that's basically because of the Farage name. So it comes with an advantage as well as disadvantages. But the reason Gawain Towler is saying this is because it's all true, and it's stuff that has been accepted as true by a lot of reformers for some time. The thing is that building up big names takes time. They're clearly trying to do it with Cero poaching. I think to some degree it's working. And when it comes to policy depth, yes, that is true. They obviously need to do that, and guess who's been saying that for quite some time? Pretty much everyone in reform. That's why they keep promising more policy. I know we're all waiting on that migration policy. However, when you win 10 councils and you need to focus on making sure the councils don't screw it up, yeah, that kind of takes priority away from policy development. But, these things take time. And clearly, they're outsourcing to experts. They're going to think tanks that create policy. So with that front and centre on your mind, I'd say not too much to worry about. So a reform government wouldn't just face opposition parties, it would collide with the Britain's entrenched structures, built to resist radicals like us. These aren't abstract, they're concrete threats to implementing our agenda on immigration, taxes, welfare and deregulation. Because at the end of the day, those are the main things they keep going on about. Tax burden's massive, rich people are leaving, so the tax take's going to go down. Immigration's absolutely huge. Something like 1 million foreign-born people. In fact, no, I think it's foreign nationals are on universal credit. So not just foreign-born people, and obviously then also they want to deregulate things. There's plenty of people who keep saying, oh, reform are just, they're effectively turning into national socialists. I'm sorry, but, the nationalist part, yeah, obviously. But taxes, welfare and deregulation, sorry, that is a Thatcherite agenda. They're obviously still instinctive Thatcherites. They're just trying to win over the Labour vote and effectively bribe them into liking their politics, which is basic first-past-the-post politics. Start with the Lords. This unelected relic stuffed with appointees is reform-free zone. It could veto bills on border control, economic reform, sparking a constitutional showdown. Our manifesto might call for slashing its size or abolition, echoing past fights like the 1911 Parliament Act, but peers with lifetimes of privilege won't yield easily. They'll frame resistance as defending democracy, delaying us for years, while public frustration builds. I mean, I am all for reforming the Lords. I'd put it back to the hereditary system, but nobody seems to have an appetite for that, so I don't think it's happening. The judiciary is equally formidable. Post-Blair courts have ballooned judicial reviews, often clashing with parliamentary sovereignty. Influenced by the ECHR, they've blocked deportations and migration policies. We'd aim to curb this by exiting the ECHR, reforming or repealing the Human Rights Act and limiting the Supreme Court's reach, but judges are insulated. Interpreting law through human rights lenses, backed by sloppy legislation but detached from voters' will. Legal challenges could tie us in knots, portraying reform as authoritarian while real issues fester. Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is a man who is quite likely, from what I can tell, to get on reform's board. And to be honest with you, this is what people like Gawain, with Farage and with that whole top brass, will have been talking about for years. These are all the correct problems. Do they have all the right solutions? Probably not. I don't think that one on the Lords is perfect, for example. However, that judiciary paragraph, that's cocaine to me. Then there's the Quangocracy, a sprawling network of bodies spending $353 billion annually pre-Labour expansion. Oh my god. With chiefs out-earning the PM. From the BBC to NHS England, these quasi-autonomous entities advance agendas with scant accountability. They're effectively NGOs, but they're actually government organisations. They lobby ferociously against cuts, leaking to the media and unions to paint us as heartless. Dismantling this blob requires political will, but entrenched interest could sabotage from within, turning reform into a quagmire. And again, this is basically all. This is all that Liz Truss has been talking about since being kicked out. And again, reform and the people within it, all the way back to UKIP, had similar complaints, but they never had to think about it properly because they were always a pressure group. Now they're having to actually think about it. It is very, very good to see. Whitehall's civil service is the silent killer. Mandarins prioritise stability over change, slow-walking policies they dislike. We've seen it under the Tories, bold ideas on migration or bureaucracy evaporate in red tape. A reform PM would need loyalists in key posts, but the service's neutrality is a romantic dream, no longer the reality on the ground. Leaks, resignations and passive aggression could derail delivery, leaving pledges unfulfilled. This happened to Dominic Raab, even happened to Priti Patel, even though she stands by a terrible record. Obviously it happened to Braverman, definitely happened to Liz Truss as well. And yeah, obviously it's something that needs to be dealt with. Big businesses pose a subtler threat. Globalists in the CBI and FTSE favour open borders for cheap labour and EU alignment for ease. Our pro-competition anti-corporatist stance might prompt threats of relocation or investment strikes. They'd whisper about economic chaos, eroding confidence, balancing this, courting investment while smashing cronyism. Demands finesse, we must build now. These are all the big problems that this channel has been talking about for years and has been impressed when people in the Tories talk about this, when obviously UKIP and the Brexit Party and Reform talked about this, obviously Liz Truss. Why am I a number one acolyte? Because this is all she talks about. Terrible political actor, excellent at pointing out the issues and what needs to be done with them. Same thing's happening here. Why would I not be on their side? Politics isn't static. Threats evolve. Labour reeling at 22% in the polls might push proportional representation to splinter the right and enable coalitions. The irony, though, PR would supercharge us from 5 seats on 14.3% to 90 or to 90 at 14.3%, that is, or 180 plus at 30%, but it risks diluting majorities, forcing alliances with a rump-centrist Conservative Party that compromises on net zero or immigration. We'd become fixtures, but being able to effect the real change we need would suffer. Devolved arenas add layers. Wales' PR system offers Senedd gains, but nationalists could coalition block unionist policies. In Scotland, our projected 17-seat clash with SNP independent streams, missteps could alienate the central belt. London's outer boroughs, battered by crime and costs, are ripe, but inner-city demographics resist our messaging on community and borders. These aren't hypotheticals, they're flashpoints where gains could turn Pyrrhic if mishandled. Again, the man just knows what he's talking about, and this is effectively my channel distilled into a thought piece by Gawain, and this is why I listen to him an awful lot. He is a man, largely with my temperament, who is kind of on the inside of reform, way more than I am. I'm on the inside a bit, I know a few councillors, but this is a man who worked with Farage and the very top of Farage's teams pretty much for the last 2 decades. Here's the deepest threat. Winning power but botching it. If you do not think that Reform and Farage do not understand the position that they are in, you are out of your mind. Farage for the past few months has effectively been saying, listen, it looks like I'm going to get into power. If I don't do what needs to be done to save Britain from the position it's in now, you're going to get something much worse than me. Do you know what that something much worse is? It's basically British Hitler. That's what he's implying. I know this for pretty much a fact, because I effectively tweeted that, and some of Farage's top team liked it. So clearly I was on the money there. 14 years of Tory failures, sky-high migration despite promises, thank you Robert Jenrick, housing crises, NHS queues, plus Labour's detachment have nuked public trust. Into this morass step Reform, vowing integrity. But failure could finish democracy. Churchill quipped, it's the worst system except for the alternatives, but when it stops delivering, alternatives beckon. A great line, to be honest. Alarmingly, 30% of under 25s now eye authoritarianism to smash gridlock. History warns French Revolution, interwar fascism, Soviet fall, all follow systemic distrust. If Reform's government gets mired in institutional wars, unable to cut taxes, secure borders, or smash welfare traps, cynicism explodes. Voters won't just switch parties, they'll reject the system. Extremes rise, far-left populism, or worse. Farage gets this, but our outreach to think tanks and businesses isn't fluff, it's arming for battle. We need radical blueprints. Abolish lords, reign in court, gut quangos, reform civil service, make work pay, end welfare dependency, but delivery demands partners of goodwill beyond our base. Again, to be clear, I like the sound of all that apart from abolish the lords. I would return the lords to how they were. Unfortunately, we genuinely might be at a point where that's not actually possible. And if we are at that point, frankly, I've not thought about a better alternative than that anyway. Hopefully think tanks will have a better solution than just a second electric chamber. So Reform's rise is unprecedented, but so are the stakes. We're not a relic, we're a movement for rooted Britons in a demographic storm. To succeed, we must confront these threats with eyes wide open. If you're in business, a think tank, or just a concerned citizen, engage discreetly if needed. Together we can rebuild a prosperous and fair Britain, which is exactly what I want. The establishment fear us for good reason. Let's prove them right to worry. And then obviously he says drop a comment if it resonates, subscribe. It's where he posts all this good stuff. Until next time, Gawain Towler. And I suggest you go onto the mailing list too. I certainly did after this, and I follow him on Twitter. And I suggest you do that too. He's also on The Spectator and other panel shows on the internet regularly. I recommend you watch him there too. He gives a good insight into what Reform are all about and what the top brass are probably thinking. But also, as mentioned before, he is in the nomination process for the board of Reform UK and will be standing for it. And if you are in Reform and have the opportunity to vote, make sure Gawain is one of the people you are voting for. He's been with the movement for 20 years. He knows what it's about. He has helped out Farage and all his work to end up getting the end goals that they want. He was there during the Brexit referendum. He was there during the Brexit Party. He was there with Reform until Zia Yusuf effectively corporatised the HQ. And he holds no bad blood for that. Literally one of the most loyal people you could ask for. Show him some reward for the movement that we've all joined and vote him in to be on the board. It'll be great stuff. Especially if he is the man pointing out all the problems and throwing out some possibilities of what could be done about these sorts of things. Make no mistake, Reform understand the pressure that is on them. The reason it doesn't look like they're doing an awful lot? They're probably gearing up for some major announcements. We've seen it before. We saw it with the Britannia card. They did it with the migration speech at the end of April, just before the May elections. They cork these all up for their conferences and for around the time elections are happening to massively up the reason to vote for them. They're not the type really to drip feed. They are more the type to go out with a bang, say. So I would say look forward to party conference season and look forward to Gawain hopefully being on the board with a few other people who I have no doubt will be equally as competent and understand the position we're in. But I think that's about all I had for you for today. So, in terms of shill time, tonight is Tosh Talks. We're e-fapping Lotus Eaters, so do come along to that if you want to hear me lose my mind about that again. Thursday we've got some Hollow Knight gameplay and videos out as and when I can make them. If you enjoy the channel, do subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment. Those are free and easy things you can do to help me out with the channel. You can also, if you have a little bit of cash to spare, become a member or leave super chats or super thanks. All great ways to help out the channel. Right, with that, that's everything I had for you for today. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.